Hi, this is Geshe Michael, and we're continuing our review of the categories of the Sumbum, or the native Tibetan commentaries on Buddhism, that stretch from about 1000 AD to the present time. So it covers about just over 1,000 years of materials. And I'm going to start the recording on the screen right now. And we've reached a category called Tokcho. So Tokcho is the Tibetan translation of the word avadana, a Sanskrit word. Tokpa Jupa means to describe the realizations, Tokpa Jupa. And this is a class of literature or a genre of literature from ancient India in which they tell the life stories of famous saints other than the Buddha, most often other than the Buddha. So when we're talking about the Buddha's life stories, we are talking about Jataka or Kira in Tibetan, but when we're talking about the other saints, we're talking about the Avadanas. And there's a couple of famous books from India. One is called the Avadana Shataka, in which they give 100, it's called the 100 stories of famous Indian saints. And these are beautiful stories of the great practitioners from ancient India. I dove into that pretty deeply when I was studying the Wheel of Life, and the story of King Udayana, who's also known as Rudrayana, who's also known as Raudrayana, and his experiences with King Bimbisara, who's also a saint, and how the Wheel of Life was painted for them. So you will find that story in the Avadanas, and you have to be able to dig into them. So a few Tibetan authors, not a lot, have dug into the Avadanas and written commentaries on them, which is mostly pulling moral lessons out of those Avadanas and giving us advice based on those Avadanas. The next category here is called Semtsamba, which is mind-only school, which has two names. One is Yogacara, and then Chittamatra, the two mind-only school. Then this is the third of the great four schools of ancient India. The cutoff line is between 2 and 3, so it is a Mahayana school. It's a greater way school. And they have very beautiful and difficult understandings of especially the idea of emptiness, which for them still involves the working of things existing within those things, but in a very sophisticated way. So this is a whole study of that ancient school of Master Sangha, came down through Master Sangha, and the study of this mind-only school. And beautiful commentaries on that. Particularly important for the study of Kunchi, Alaya Vijnana, Foundation Consciousness, and Nyinyi, certain states of afflicted, mentally afflicted or negative emotions. Next we have the Da. Da just means sound. And the Sanskrit for that is Shabda. And that's the Sanskrit name for the study of Sanskrit. It's called the sound, Shabda. So we kept that name in categorizing the Tibetan commentaries. And these are Tibetan works written about Sanskrit. Okay, so Tibetan works written about the Tibetan language are called Sumta. We talked about that. But Tibetan works written about the study of Sanskrit are called Da, or Shabda. A word of caution, in my opinion, the grammar book by Dwight Whitney, who was my teacher's teacher of Sanskrit, from Yale University, and I think it's the 1920s, I'm not sure, maybe 1930, 40. I think that's the best grammar book you can use for the study of Sanskrit. It's very, very difficult to study Sanskrit from a Tibetan commentary on Sanskrit, which are mostly sort of they're almost sometimes, in my mind, confused explanations of Sanskrit grammar books written in Sanskrit. And so I think if you really want to learn Sanskrit, it might be a lot easier just to go to a modern Sanskrit grammar. I think Whitney's Sanskrit grammar is by far the best if you can be disciplined and bite off a difficult book. But there's no greater book in the world for Sanskrit grammar. So these are of historical interest. You might find, for example, if you're studying Panini, which is the great person who standardized Sanskrit grammar, in India, then you could go into these books and get an insight into Panini, but you would have to have a lot of training to read these books. Next we have Kartsi. Say Kartsi. This kar is short for karma, which in Tibetan doesn't mean karma, it means a star, jyotish, a star. And then si means calculation. For example, arithmetic in Tibetan is called sigya. So star calculation means astrology. It's kind of a cross between astrology and astronomy, okay? And I don't know, when I grew up, still, I feel like Western astrology, like you read in the newspaper, if you're Sagittarius, then you're going to have a bad day and watch out for red cats or something. And we kind of treat astrology as something sort of not too serious. But the study of Kartsi in Tibet is a very serious thing. It's a tantric subject based on the principle mainly expressed in the Kalachakra Tantra that the condition of the planets and stars and other bodies in the sky that you see is a reflection of your own karma, is a reflection of your own inner body. So what you see in the heavens at night, the movement of the stars, comets, unusual events in the sky at night, those are, in theory, caused by movements of prana in your inner body. So you can study the condition of the stars and draw conclusions about your inner body if you've been trained properly. So for my teacher, Ken Rinpoche, Geshe Losang Tarchen, this was a very, very serious subject. And he actually undertook a very extensive study of it. His teacher asked him to wait until after he finished his Geshe studies and his tantric studies. And then he actually did start Kartsi. So this is it's a much more serious subject than Western astrology, I think. And it takes, the language is very specific, very difficult, and it takes a lot of training to understand it. The next one is called Men. Say Men. Men is very simply medicine. Memba is the word for a doctor in Tibetan language. So Men means medicine. Osha means herbal medicines. And then Men is the study of medicine. Medicine in Tibet is very, very, very interesting because it is a hybrid of Ayurveda from India and of Chinese traditional medicine. So Tibet geographically, because of its position between China and India, was influenced by both medical systems. So it's very interesting if you want to study Chinese medicine, traditional medicine, or you want to study Ayurveda from India, the study of Tibetan classical medical literature is very, very interesting and very deep, and it takes a lot of training. And it's very fertile ground for future studies if someone were very interested in medicine or in the correct interpretation of traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. Tibetan texts on Men would be the place to go. Next is called Nyenga. Say Nyenga. Nyen means a sweet sound. A guitar in Tibetan is called Ja Nyen. Ja means sound, Nyen means sweet. So Nyengak is the Tibetan word for classical Indian poetry, kavya. So this is mostly a very, very beautiful ancient system of poetry from India. And then the Tibetans tried to borrow it. So it's a borrowed thing from India. So you have beautiful words like, I was telling you guys the other day, Gangtung is the word for a plant because it means to drink through your leg, right? And so that's a poeticism. Or Chunzin, not Chunzin, but Chunzin means water holder, Jalandhara. And that means a cloud, for example. So then these are all poeticisms. So the most common use of these poeticisms is in metaphors, nicknames for things that are common objects. They have flowery, beautiful names like foot drinker or things like the lotus is called Sokye, born of the lake. And like that. So then, if you want to write some beautiful poetry in Tibetan, you would go study the Nyengak. And they are very beautiful, even though they are sort of artificial, overly artificial borrowing of a system from ancient India. Still, they are beautiful in their own way, and great lamas incorporate Nyingok principles into, especially the introductions of books, or what we call the intermission poetry that you find in the middle of great books to kind of lighten up the mood a little bit. The next category, I'm skipping the little category of my own notes, is called Sema. We have 2 more categories to finish. Sema is the study of, Sema means pramana, which means valid or correct perception. And it means it's a school of thought. It's one of the ancient 4 schools of thought called Sautrantika, those who follow sutra studies. But they were the great logicians of ancient India. So in here you get formal logic, which may have come down through Aristotle from his student Alexander, when he came to India and established Greek kingdoms that lasted for 500 years. In the middle of India, Ashoka, the greatest king of India, was 1/4 Greek, possibly. So in here you have both 2 great subjects. I mean, you have valid perception in the sense of logic, reasoning. What are the rules of formal logic, Aristotelian logic? What is a syllogism? What is the major premise? What is the minor premise? But then, secondly, and maybe more importantly, you have the study of how is it that we recognize objects? How do we piece together objects? When I see 4 black spheres, discs, and a bump there, how do I know that's a car? How does my mind glue together the pieces of car and then creates a car out of it? Very important subject here is the distinction between archetypes in the mind, car, and expressions of that archetype in the world. This yellow car, this black car, this blue car. So the expressions, the concrete expressions, chedak, of a chi, of a mental image, right, in the mind. So that's in Tibet, that has been called the doorway to emptiness. The study of pramana, or logic, or how do we, perceptual theory really, is often called in Tibet the door to emptiness. It is one of the Hinayana schools, Theravada schools, the second of the 4 great schools. So it's not Mahayana, and they don't have as sophisticated a presentation of emptiness as you find in the 3rd and 4th schools, mind only and middle way. But I would say it's crucial for the understanding of emptiness in the higher schools. Crucial to understand it. And that's reflected in the Geshe studies in Tibet, in a Tibetan monastery, Gelugpa monastery, where we will spend 3 months a year for the whole 20 to 25 years. We take a break in the winter and we just study Sema. Every year for 2 or 3 months we just study pramana very deeply. So it is the key to understanding emptiness. Very valuable, difficult, it takes good training, it takes a good teacher. All of these subjects, many of them, have their own unique languages, separate languages, that has separate vocabulary. So you can understand formal logic but not understand Madhyamika or medicine or even Abhidharma. These are all different languages. So they really would require a great etymological studies, great dictionary studies. For future translators, we will have to record several different complete languages so that they can read the whole body of Tibetan literature. You can understand the language of pramana, of perceptual theory, and have no idea what the mind-only school is talking about, for example. Okay, the last category we have here is called, it's a separate category just devoted to the Tsingtse Chemul. In Tibet there were not great dictionaries. There were lists of words that were used to translate the classics from Sanskrit into Tibetan, like the Mahavipati, but these were ordered by importance of subject. So, first you'd have all the words for Buddhas, or any word relating to a Buddha, and then you'd have any word relating to Bodhisattvas, and then down at the end you'd have words relating to different kinds of rocks and things. And there's no order to it. So they're almost useless as a dictionary. I mean, a student comes to a word and they would have to look through the whole dictionary to find the word, or they would have to guess where where names of trees were put, you know, and they're impossible to use. So it wasn't until, I don't know, the 20th century that a few great dictionaries were written in Tibetan, Tibetan dictionaries. But we're very fortunate that a major dictionary of 3 huge volumes was completed inside of Tibet in the last 30, 40 years, and it's very, very good. It's a Tibetan dictionary, and I use it several hundred times a day, something like that. It's just incredible per week. So it's just an incredible piece of work. It's a great piece of work. It includes many of those different languages that we talked about, and it's pretty definitive. A few of the some percentage of the definitions are not great, but they're all. It's a very, very valuable work. So we made an agreement with the people who wrote that dictionary, and we typed it in for them from the paper copy, and you know, that's copyrighted, but we supply it for research purposes only, and it's invaluable. It's a really, really valuable Tibetan dictionary. And so we've even included it as a separate category. Then finally, and then we'll conclude our study of the Sungbum, meaning we will conclude our study of the 3 great categories or areas of our library, that the rooms of our library that you can walk into if you're looking for something, is undetermined. These are works that we only have little pieces of them, only a few pages survive, or it's not clear what the subject of the book is about, and we call it undetermined. So as yet, we haven't decided what the book's about. Probably we don't have all the pages, including the first 10 pages or so, so we can't really decide who wrote it or what it's about. So those are the categories of the Sungbum. You need to know these subject categories well for the Kangyur, for the Tengyur, and the Sungbum, because you cannot conduct a search if you don't know where to look, okay? If you go looking in the science section of the library to find out something about, I don't know, history of Greece or something, or something like that, you won't find it. You know, you have to go to the history category. You have to go to the history part of the library. So these videos that we've just concluded, for the parts of these 3 great pieces of the ACIP database, you should study these videos over and over again until you know all the categories, because you cannot conduct a search until you know where to look. Okay, if you go searching the whole 500,000 pages for something indiscriminately without going to a particular section, that would be like going through a major university library looking for a single book. It would just be a tremendous expenditure of time. So a user of Gopher, the ACIP database, has to be familiar with all of the places in the library that they can go to look for things, and to conduct a successful search, which is the point of this huge 25 years of work so far, is if you want to find something, you have to know where to look, and therefore you should educate yourself about the sections of the Kangyur, Tengyur, and Sungbum. There are a few more sections that we'll talk about in the next video that relate to the ACIP database, the reference section and the Sanskrit section, etc. And we'll talk about that in the next video. Thank you.